The room is quiet, the lights are low, and only the felt seems alive, soft, deep green beneath the hum of a single lamp. 2 seats, 2 stacks, no crowd, no noise, no distractions. Just you, your opponent, and the rhythm between breaths. Heads-up poker has a certain stillness to it, a distilled version of the game where every hand is a confrontation not only with another player, but with yourself. There's nowhere to hide. Every decision reflects your mindset, your patience, your awareness. In this setting, the game stops being about cards and starts being about clarity. Before we begin, if these kinds of deep, thoughtful poker sessions help you slow down and think clearer, consider subscribing. It really supports the channel, and it helps more players find their way to this quiet table. Now, let's settle in. You can hear the faint click of chips, the soft shuffle of the deck. There's no rush here. Tonight, we're not chasing results or luck. We're studying rhythm. In heads-up play, rhythm is everything. The pulse of action and stillness, the flow between aggression and restraint. It's the purest form of poker because it removes the comfort of anonymity. When it's one-on-one, every move is seen, every hesitation read, every emotion magnified. You become a mirror for your opponent, and your opponent becomes a mirror for you. Most players think of heads-up poker as a test of boldness or bravado. They picture sharp bluffs, big pots, and fast decisions. But at its core, heads-up is a test of focus. It's about emotional control and perception, reading not only what's in front of you, but what's within you. Every hesitation reveals something. Every unnecessary call or forced bet traces back to a thought that wasn't clear. To play well here, you have to learn to see yourself in the other seat. Heads Up teaches humility faster than any other format. There's no waiting for good cards, no hiding behind tight play. You're forced to participate, to make decisions with imperfect information, and to accept that clarity matters more than control. You'll lose hands you played perfectly, and you'll win hands you misplayed. But what separates mastery from chaos is how you respond. Do you adapt? Or do you double down on emotion? Do you slow down to think, or speed up to escape the discomfort of uncertainty? That difference defines not only your session, but your evolution as a player. In the calm of a one-on-one play, you start to notice things you miss in full-ring chaos. The tempo of bets, the subtle timing of checks, the language of stillness between actions. You begin to understand that poker isn't just a game of chance or logic, it's a game of presence. Being here, in this moment, without distraction or fear. Every chip that moves across the felt carries meaning. Every bet is a statement about what you believe right now, not just about your hand, but about yourself. This video is not about complicated math or solver theory. We'll leave charts aside for now. Instead, we'll walk through rhythm, reasoning, and awareness, the 3 quiet foundations of heads-up mindset. We'll explore how focus shapes your range, how patience stabilizes your aggression, and how flow, the natural balance between intuition and logic, emerges when you stop trying to control the outcome. The goal here isn't to make you play more hands or win faster. It's to make you see the game more clearly, so that every decision, big or small, feels deliberate and calm. Over the next hour, we'll move slowly through each layer of the heads-up experience. From preflop logic to emotional resilience, from mental fatigue to moments of flow, we'll uncover how every choice you make at the table echoes patterns from your daily life. Discipline, fear, patience, ego. The heads-up table simply magnifies them. What's left when the cards are gone and the chips are even is awareness itself, because when you strip poker down to its simplest form, one player, one opponent, it stops being about beating someone else. It becomes about mastering your own reaction. The table becomes a mirror, and the quiet that fills the room is where you start to see yourself clearly. At first glance, heads-up poker seems like chaos. The ranges are wide, the action is constant, and the margin for error feels impossibly thin. But beneath that motion lies a kind of order, a set of principles that guide the flow between logic and instinct. When you understand these principles, you stop reacting to your opponent and start responding to the situation itself. That's the heart of heads-up play. You're not playing the cards, you're playing the space between 2 minds. The first foundational truth is that position magnifies everything. In a full-ring game, you can wait. You can fold your way through a dozen hands, watching from the sidelines until something playable comes along. But in heads-up, the blinds come relentlessly. Every hand is a confrontation, and the dealer position becomes the pulse of the game. With only two players, the small blind and the button are one and the same. Acting first before the flop but last after it, that small shift defines the rhythm of aggression and defense. From that position, you must learn to open frequently, pressure intelligently, and still know when to step back. Without that awareness, you'll leak chips, not because you played bad cards, but because you misunderstood your role in the flow. The second truth is that aggression is not recklessness. Many players, when facing the open space of heads-up play, feel a surge of freedom. They push every edge, fire every barrel, bluff because it feels like that's what good players do, but aggression without balance is noise. Real aggression has purpose. It creates folds when they're needed, and it extracts value when the moment is right. It's not about winning every pot, it's about maintaining momentum. Every bet should serve a reason, even if that reason is simply to test the structure of your opponent's range. Uncontrolled aggression is exhausting for you and for your bankroll. Controlled aggression is pressure applied with rhythm, not rage. The third principle is pattern recognition. In a long heads-up match, information compounds. You're not just watching hands, you're mapping behaviours. Timing, sizing, posture, and even silence, all of these small signals form a story. The key is to collect without judgment. You don't have to know for sure that your opponent is bluffing. You just have to notice how they act when they are strong, and how they act when they are uncertain. With time, your awareness sharpens until their decisions begin to feel predictable. Not because you can read minds, but because you've learned to listen to the rhythm of repetition. Another foundation, one that separates quiet mastery from chaos, is emotional neutrality. Heads-up poker is deeply personal. Every pot you lose feels like a direct attack. Every bluff that gets called feels like being exposed. The ego wants to fight back, to prove something, to restore control. But the best players don't fight emotion with emotion. They let it pass. They understand that feeling tilted or frustrated doesn't mean you're weak. It just means you're human. What matters is whether you attach to it. The table rewards clarity and punishes reaction. The moment you start trying to win back respect, you've already lost the game of awareness. The next pillar is adaptability. Heads-up play is a moving target. What works against one opponent may fail against another. A tight, patient player forces you to open your range. A loose, aggressive one demands precision and traps. There's no fixed chart or static range that can save you here. Instead, you learn to build frameworks. You start from structure, what's generally sound, and then you adjust through observation. When you're adaptable, you no longer fear the unknown. You're comfortable in the shifting sands of incomplete information, and that comfort becomes a weapon. You're flexible without being erratic, confident without being stubborn. Let's ground these ideas in an example. Imagine you're on the button with a modest hand, say King 3 offsuit. You open, the big blind calls, the flop comes 9-4-2 rainbow. You've missed completely, but because you hold the initiative, your continuation bet has meaning. A small steady bet tests the waters. Does your opponent react defensively or aggressively? They call. The turn brings a king. Now you've connected, but your opponent's call has already told part of a story. Do you bet again to protect against draws, or check to let them hang themselves? The answer isn't in the math, it's in the context. Have they been floating flops or folding often? Have they respected your small bets or attacked them? Each hand becomes a microcosm of awareness. You're not simply betting your cards, you're managing a dynamic. Now imagine the same scenario, but you're out of position. The roles reverse. That same King 3 suddenly feels vulnerable, even though the board is identical. Why? Because position grants information, and without it you're guessing. Understanding this psychological weight of position changes how you perceive control. You begin to see that most of poker's tension isn't about who has the best hand, it's about who's most comfortable existing in uncertainty. A common mistake among intermediate players is to view heads-up as a sprint. They play too fast, bluff too often, and exhaust themselves in a race that doesn't exist. The truth is, heads-up poker is a marathon of micro-decisions. It's not about who wins the first few hands, it's about who maintains composure over time. You can lose a dozen pots in a row and still be fine if you never lose your presence. Likewise, you can win a few big pots and still collapse if you stop thinking clearly. The goal is equilibrium, not domination. Equilibrium keeps you patient, objective, and ready for the long rhythm of variance. All these foundations, position, controlled aggression, pattern recognition, neutrality, and adaptability, feed into one central idea: awareness. Awareness is the real skill in heads-up play. Not technical memorization, not solver perfection, but awareness of what's happening now. Awareness of your emotions, your opponent's rhythm, your physical tension, your breathing, even the way your hands touch the chips. When you're aware, you're grounded in the moment. And when you're grounded, your decision-making becomes clean and uncluttered. Mastering these principles doesn't mean you'll win every match, it means you'll stop playing against yourself. The cards will always vary, opponents will always surprise you. But when your foundation is built on awareness, you stay balanced through it all. The point isn't to predict everything, it's to remain calm when you can't. Because that calmness, over thousands of hands, is what wins the war. The core takeaway is simple. Heads-up poker is not about overpowering another person. It's about understanding your own patterns, how you respond to pressure, to fear, to randomness, and refining them until nothing external can pull you off center. Once you grasp that, every session becomes a lesson in awareness. The cards become language, the silence becomes insight, and the table stops being an opponent. It becomes a mirror. Every hand in heads-up poker unfolds like a quiet story. There's an opening, a middle, and an end, each moment shaped by the choice and awareness. When you learn to move through that story with composure, the game becomes something far deeper than a contest of luck. It becomes a meditation on timing and restraint. Each street, pre-flop, flop, turn, and river, reveals not just the logic of your strategy, but the clarity of your mind. Pre-flop is the introduction. It's where you set the tone for the entire hand. Because the blinds are constant and relentless, most hands begin with pressure. From the button, you open often, not out of arrogance, but out of structure. You're seizing the initiative, writing the first sentence of the story. From the big blind, you defend often, not to fight, but to observe. Heads-up poker is not about passivity. It's about controlled participation. The range of playable hands expands dramatically here. You're no longer waiting for premium holdings, you're managing frequencies. Hands that would be folds at a full table, Queen 5 suited, 10-7 offsuit, now become tools. Each one has potential when guided by position and awareness. But what separates a thoughtful player from an impulsive one is intention. When you raise pre-flop, ask yourself why. Is it to apply pressure? To build a pot? To balance your range? Each reason leads to a different mindset. Without that intention, even the best hands lose structure. A player who opens without purpose will see bet without purpose, and a cool down without clarity. Poker punishes noise. It rewards rhythm. Your pre-flop choices should form a quiet architecture that you can stand on when the chaos begins. Then comes the flop, the moment when theory meets emotion. The board texture appears, and suddenly the hand shifts from abstraction to reality. Now your focus must expand. You're no longer just managing cards, you're reading texture, position, initiative, and timing. But more than anything, you're managing flow. Flow in poker is not constant aggression. It's the ability to feel where the pressure naturally belongs. Some flops beg for small continuation bets. Others demand checks. The discipline lies in not forcing action where silence would speak louder. Take a simple example. You open on the button with Jack-9 suited. The big blind calls. The flop comes 10-8 4 rainbow. You flopped a strong draw, openness ended, plenty of potential. This is a natural c-bet spot, but the purpose of that bet is not only to win now, it's to define the structure of the hand. A small steady bet sets the tone. It asks questions without shouting. If your opponent calls, the story continues. If they raise, you learn something new about their rhythm. Either way, you're not chasing controls. You're participating in a dialogue. Now imagine the same hand, but the flop is King 7-2. A dry board, little connection. This is where many players overextend. They c-bet out of habit, trying to stay aggressive, even when the texture favours the defender. A wiser player pauses. They check, not as surrender, but as calibration. Checking is communication. It says, the flow isn't here yet. By stepping back, you give your opponent the illusion of control while keeping emotional balance. When you reassert later, it's deliberate, not reactive. This is where composure separates confidence from chaos. The turn is the test of patience. By now, the hand has a rhythm. You've established tone and texture. The story is halfway told. The turn often magnifies pressure. Pots grow, ranges narrow, tension rises. It's easy to lose clarity here, to bet because the pot feels big, or to call because folding feels like defeat. But heads-up poker rewards those who stay measured. You don't have to know everything, you just have to respond honestly to what you see. If you sense your opponent's story no longer makes sense, their bet size doesn't fit their earlier tone, or their timing has shifted, that's often where opportunity hides. The turn is also where discipline meets creativity. Sometimes the right move isn't the most obvious one. You might check raise a turn not to bluff, but to rebalance your range. You might slow play not for deception, but to give your opponent room to reveal themselves. Each action should echo your earlier intention. Inconsistency isn't creativity, it's confusion. True creativity in poker is logical flexibility, guided by awareness rather than impulse. Then comes the river, the resolution. By now, every detail has meaning, the preflop dynamic, the flop tempo, the turn tension. The river is rarely about raw hand strength, it's about conviction. You've built a narrative through your decisions, and now you must decide whether to stay aligned with it. This is where awareness becomes courage. Many players betray their own story here, betting when they should check, folding when they should call, not because of logic, but because of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of looking foolish, fear of losing what's already in the pot. The quiet player understands that the outcome doesn't matter as much as the integrity of their decision. You can lose the pot and still play perfectly. You can win it and still know you strayed from awareness. The river is where you measure yourself, not your bankroll. Let's walk through one full hand to see how awareness evolves across all streets. You're on the button with ace-4 suited. You raise. The big blind calls. The flop comes queen 7-5 with 2 hearts. You've flopped a backdoor flush draw and a gut shot. Your opponent checks. This is a texture where a small continuation bet makes sense. It puts pressure on middle pairs and the weak sevens while keeping the pot manageable. You bet 1/3 pot. Your opponent calls. The turn is the 3 of hearts. You've made the nut flush draw and completed your straight. Now the situation flips. What was once a cautious hand has turned strong. Your opponent checks again. You could bet big here, but the board texture, connected and wet, invites aggression from weaker hands. You decide to check back, disguising your strength and letting the river breathe. The river is the 8 of diamonds, the final board. Queen 7-5, 3-8 with 3 hearts. Your opponent now leads for nearly the full pot. It's a polarized move, either a strong hand or a desperate bluff. You take a deep breath and replay the story. Their line, check, check, big river lead, doesn't match a flush or a straight. Those hands would have bet earlier. More likely it's a single pair hand turned into a bluff. You call, they show king 7 offsuit, you take the pot. Notice what won the hand, not the cards, but the clarity of the narrative. You stayed aligned with your reasoning at every step. The calm to check the turn and the patience to observe, the composure to call on the river, these aren't accidents. They're the byproduct of awareness maintained over time. That's the real discipline. Not being perfect, but staying present. Across thousands of hands, you'll see the same lesson repel. The game rewards patience disguised as aggression and awareness disguised as courage. Each street tests a different part of you. Pre-flop tests preparation. The flop tests observation. The turn tests patience. The river tests self-trust. Together they form a complete cycle of awareness. When you play enough of these cycles, something changes. You stop worrying about wins and losses. You start caring about alignment, whether your choices feel true to your process. That's when you know you're evolving. The noise fades, the cards lose their sting, and what's left is flow, a state where logic and instinct merge, and the game feels effortless. Because in the end, a hand of poker isn't just about money or mastery. It's a mirror for how you handle uncertainty. The more calmly you navigate it, the more you realize the real opponent was never across the table. It was the part of you that wanted control. Every hand begins before the cards are even dealt. The most advanced players understand that heads-up poker is a game of preparation disguised as improvisation. What you play, how you play it, and how often, all of that begins with a starting hand plan. Not a rigid chart, but a living structure that adapts to flow. In heads-up play, where almost any 2 cards can become a story, Having a plan doesn't mean memorizing, it means anchoring yourself to principles that prevent chaos. The first layer of that plan is awareness of frequency. With only 2 players, the blinds are attacking constantly. You can't wait for aces, because the game won't wait for you. You're compelled to participate, to defend, to adjust. But there's a difference between being active and being reckless. The foundation of heads-up play lies in ratio, not randomness. When you understand how often to open, how often to defend, and how often to fold, your decisions become lighter. You no longer need to guess every moment. You trust the rhythm you've built. Think of it this way. You're the architect of your own range. Each hand you include adds shape, balance, and flexibility. When you open too tight, you become predictable. Your bets scream strength. When you open too loose, you become scattered. Your chips drift without purpose. The art lies in mixing both energies. Enough range to stay dynamic, enough discipline to stay composed. Over time, you begin to feel this balance intuitively. It stops being about memorization and starts being about rhythm, an internal metronome that tells you when to expand, when to contract, and when to pause entirely. Position once again defines the architecture. From the button, you hold initiative. The dealer's advantage is subtle but enormous. Acting last post-flop means your decisions come with more clarity, less guessing. Therefore, your opening range should be wide and assertive. Raise most hands, even weak-suited cards or connected offsuit combinations. Their raw strength matters less than their playability, and the ability to connect with boards, to represent strength, to pressure your opponent into folding too often. The point isn't to win every pot, it's to force your opponent into mistakes over time. From the big blind, your plan flips. Now you're reacting. The temptation here is to defend everything. After all, folding feels like giving up. But defense without structure becomes self-sabotage. You want to call with hands that can realize equity, hands that can improve meaningfully or exert pressure later. Suited cards, connected cards, anything that interacts with boards more fluidly than the garbage that can't. Weak offsuit hands with gaps or with disconnected middles, those are your quiet folds, the ones that keep your structure clean. Every time you fold correctly, you're not being passive, you're conserving energy. In long matches, that restraint matters more than any single pot. A useful way to think about it is in ratios of readiness. Imagine dividing your potential hands into 3 groups: playable, situational, and discard. Playable hands, the top 40 to 50%, are those you can enter the pot with confidently. Situational hands, the middle 30%, are those you play selectively depending on opponent tendencies and position. Discard hands, the weakest 20 to 30%, are those that drain focus if you insist on playing them. This isn't math, it's mindset. By classifying hands this way, you protect your mental bandwidth. Each decision becomes simpler. Is this a clear open, a conditional defend, or a quiet fold? That's structure in motion. Now let's talk about balance. Every advanced heads-up player lives in the tension between exploitation and equilibrium. Exploitation means adjusting to your opponent's weakness, folding less when they fold too much, bluffing more when they call too little. Equilibrium means protecting your range so you can't be exploited in return. It's a constant dance between clarity and camouflage. The danger lies in leaning too far one way. Play purely exploitative poker and you'll dominate the weak but crumble against the disciplined. Play purely balanced poker and you'll become robotic, missing the very opportunities that make the game alive. The middle path is rhythm. Use balance as your default state, a calm baseline that keeps you steady, and use exploitation as your accent, a temporary push when the pattern reveals itself. Imagine you're playing someone who folds too often to continuation bets. You don't suddenly start bluffing every flop. You increase your frequency slightly, testing the pattern while keeping structure intact. That way, if the pattern shifts, you can recalibrate instantly. You never let your ego dictate your aggression. You let the data do it. That's true professionalism. The ability to stay fluid without being emotional. Ratios also apply to your post-flop mindset. For every bluff you make, you need value hands that mirror the same line. For every check raise, there must exist strong and weak versions to protect that line from being read. This is where the concept of range protection stops being theory and becomes emotional discipline. It's tempting to check when weak and bet when strong. It feels intuitive, honest, but predictability is a luxury you can't afford heads up. Your opponent is watching patterns form, so your job is not to trick them. It's to remain unreadable because your decisions flow from structure, not emotion. That's the difference between chaos and control. Let's step into an example. You open on the button with 9-7 suited. The big blind calls. The flop comes Jack 6-3 with one of your suit. You have a gutshot and backdoor potential, a classic semi-connected hand. Your continuation bet here doesn't say, I have it. It says, I understand the range battle. You represent top pairs, strong jacks, even over pairs. Your opponent calls. The turn brings an 8. Suddenly, you've made your straight. Now your structure rewards you. Because you've balanced your flop bets, bluffing and value in equal rhythm, your opponent has no way to distinguish one from the other. When you bet again, the story flows naturally. You're not forcing anything. You're simply letting the plan breathe. This kind of clarity builds confidence. You stop chasing reads and start trusting your system. You fold more cleanly, raise more confidently, and recover faster from mistakes. Every decision feels lighter because it belongs to a larger framework. That's the secret benefit of a starting hand plan. It removes the mental noise of uncertainty. You're not reinventing the game each hand, you're expressing your structure in motion. But structure doesn't mean rigidity. The best heads-up players treat every opponent like a new terrain. Some demand patience, others demand pressure. Your opening frequencies adjust slightly. Your calling ranges breathe wider or narrower. The key is to make these changes consciously, not reactively. If you expand your range, you know why. If you tighten it, you understand the trade-off. There's awareness in every deviation. That's what keeps your confidence pure. You're not guessing, you're adapting. Over time, this approach extends beyond poker. You start noticing that your ability to plan, to balance aggression and patience, mirrors your ability to live. A bad day doesn't make you chase every pot. A lucky streak doesn't make you reckless. You learn to think in terms of ratios everywhere. Effort and rest, risk and reward, presence and surrender. The cards simply reflect it back to you. The real purpose of building a starting hand plan isn't to memorize ranges, it's to build a mental anchor, something you can return to when emotion pulls you away. A structure that reminds you who you are as a player. In long matches, fatigue, frustration and variance will test your composure. But if your plan is built on balance, rhythm and awareness, you'll always find your center again. That's how mastery begins, not in memorization, but in alignment. Your hands become extensions of logic, your folds extensions of patience, your aggression extensions of clarity. You no longer chase outcomes, you play the rhythm. And in that rhythm, the game begins to play you back, teaching the same lesson over and over. Structure brings freedom. Heads-up play takes on a different gravity when it happens at the end of a tournament. After hours, or even days, of navigating shifting stacks, opponents and structures, you reach the final stage where there's nowhere left to hide. Every hand matters, every chip has purpose. The blinds are large enough that every decision reverberates through your stack like a pulse. But despite the intensity of this moment, the mindset that carries you through is not aggression, it's composure. The best tournament players don't win because they force the action. They win because they maintain clarity when everyone else starts playing scared. Heads up in a tournament is paradoxical. It's both the most tactical and the most emotional part of the game. You're playing for everything, yet you must act as though nothing matters. The stakes, the spotlight, the fatigue, none of it can alter your awareness. Because here, your edge isn't just technical, it's psychological endurance. After hundreds of hands, patterns blur, logic softens, and the mind longs for closure. But the great players remain patient. They don't chase the finish line, they let it arrive when the rhythm allows. Tournament structure defines the flow. At deep stacks, before the blinds suffocate the rhythm, you can afford to play a more balanced range. You'll see more flops, slow down your 3-bets, and use smaller sizings to extract information. This phase rewards subtlety. You can pressure without committing, bluff without exposure. It's where you can feel the texture of the game, like running your fingers across the felt and knowing exactly how much resistance it gives. At this stage, your awareness should focus on gathering reads, timing, emotional rhythm, post-hand behavior. These quiet details become invaluable later. when both of you are down to shallow stacks and every heartbeat matters. As the blinds rise, the structure tightens. Suddenly, each pot is significant. Stack-to-pot ratios shrink, and post-flop play becomes compressed. Many players panic here, mistaking urgency for opportunity. They start forcing aggression, shoving hands they don't understand, trying to end it before the blinds end them. But a calm player recognizes the shift and adapts their framework instead of abandoning it. You're not losing control, you're just operating within smaller margins. The art of short stack heads-up poker is patience disguised as pressure. You still attack, but you do so deliberately, aware that one mistake can cost the entire tournament. At around 20 big blinds effective, your preflop plan simplifies but never becomes robotic. Open raising slightly smaller, 2 times the blind or less, keeps pressure consistent without overcommitting. Mixing in limps with medium-strength hands allows flexibility and keeps your opponent guessing. When you shove, you do it from logic, not emotion. You understand that fold equity is a resource, not a gamble. Every all-in is a statement of structure. It says, I understand the math, the momentum, and my emotional state. The average player shoves to end discomfort. The advanced player shoves because it fits within the rhythm of their range. At 10 big blinds or fewer, intuition and memory merge. You're no longer playing full street poker. You're making high-frequency, high-impact decisions under pressure. You rely on ratios, pattern recall, and emotional control. There's a strange calm that arrives here, if you allow it. You realize the outcome is largely written in the math, yet your control still matters. You can't decide which cards fall, but you can decide how you meet them, whether you act with panic or poise. That small difference often determines who wins. Let's explore how stack depth shifts perception. Imagine 2 scenarios. In the first, you and your opponent are deep, 150 big blinds effective. You open the button with King 10 suited, and your opponent 3 bets small from the big blind. Here, you can call comfortably. There's room to play, to maneuver, to test post-flop awareness. Position and depth allow patience. In the second scenario, you both have 12 big blinds. The same hand, King 10 suited, now feels entirely different. It's often a shove or fold, depending on tendencies. There's no room for flow, it's a decision point compressed by structure. Yet even here, mindset remains everything. The same calm you used to navigate deep stacks should exist now in miniature. You're still reading rhythm, only the tempo is quickened. One of the greatest challenges in tournament heads-up play is dealing with variance fatigue. After hours of ups and downs, your emotional reserves thin. Small beats feel magnified. Lucky rivers sting harder. But this is where you see who truly understands focus. The ability to reset after every hand, to let go, breathe, and return to neutrality is what separates survival from tilt. A player who can lose a flip and stay composed is more dangerous than any solver-trained technician, because when the mind remains balanced, patterns reveal themselves again. Awareness returns, and with awareness, timing follows. Awareness also means recognizing momentum. In long heads-up battles, momentum is real, not mystical but psychological. When one player wins several pots in a row, it changes the energy at the table. The loser often tightens subconsciously, folds hands they should defend, starts doubting instincts. The winner begins expanding, sometimes recklessly. The professional doesn't react to either side of that swing, they observe it. If you're losing several small pots, you don't chase them back, you stay present. If you're winning several, you don't assume invincibility. You respect regression. You understand that momentum isn't an external force, it's an internal illusion created by short-term variance. Once you see through it, it loses its power. ICM pressure, the invisible weight of payout structure, adds another layer of complexity. At final tables, the difference between first and second can be life-changing. Fear sneaks in disguised as logic. You start calculating not what's optimal, but what feels safest. This is the moment to remember why you built structure in the first place. Structure keeps you grounded when fear begins to speak. You're not gambling your tournament away, you're executing a range you've already accepted. There's a quiet kind of bravery in that, trusting your preparation over your panic. Let's imagine a final hand scenario. You're heads up in a tournament with a moderate lead, 35 big blinds to your opponent's 25. You open on the button with Queen 8 suited. Your opponent calls. The flop comes 10-9-3 rainbow. They check. You continuation bet small, half expecting a check raise from their aggression pattern. They call instead. The turn is the Jack of Hearts, giving you the nuts straight. The trap is to get emotional, to feel the victory approaching and overplay it. But awareness slows you down. You remember the stack sizes, the structure, the opponent's tendencies. You check. They bet large, you call, letting them carry the story. The river comes a harmless 4, they shove. You take your time, replaying the rhythm of the hand, and every detail fits. They had middle pair, turned into a bluff. You call, it's over. The lesson isn't the win, it's the clarity under pressure. You didn't rush, you didn't celebrate early, you let the structure guide you until the final moment. That's the flow state of tournament heads-up play, when you're so deeply aligned with your process that even in the final hand with lights, cameras and exhaustion pressing down, you feel still inside. Heads-up tournaments reveal the full circle of poker psychology. Early in your career, you chase victory. Later, you chase control. Eventually, you realize that control is an illusion, and awareness is all that remains. The players who master this balance don't win every time, but they last. They stay calm through bubbles and beats, through good runs and droughts. They survive variance not by resisting it, but by aligning with it. In that alignment, there's peace, because when the final hand is over and the chips are counted, the real victory isn't on the table, it's in the quiet moment afterward, when you realize you played without fear, without force and without losing yourself. That's what it means to win heads-up, to remain fully present until the very end. At the heart of heads-up poker lies one truth. Your greatest opponent is never across the table. It's the part of you that reacts, the one that tightens when you're behind, that flares with pride when you're ahead. Emotional control is the real frontier of mastery. It's not about being numb or robotic, it's about remaining aware when emotion rises, because emotion will always rise. Fear, frustration, boredom, ego, they visit every player eventually. The question is not whether they appear, it's whether you invite them to sit down and deal the cards. Every player enters heads-up play with a mental narrative running beneath the surface. Some tell themselves they're due for luck. Some convince themselves they're cursed. Some quietly need to prove they're better than the person sitting opposite them. These invisible stories drive more bad decisions than misreads or misclicks ever will. The goal of emotional control isn't to erase those stories, it's to see them clearly enough that they stop steering your hands. Let's start with fear. Fear disguises itself well. It often sounds like logic. I'll just wait for a better spot. I'll fold here to keep my stack safe. No need to risk it. Fear speaks softly, but its goal is always the same, to protect your ego from loss. In heads-up play, fear is poison, because with only 2 players, avoidance becomes predictable. The moment your opponent senses timidity, they'll exploit it relentlessly. The cure for fear isn't courage, it's clarity. When you fully accept that variance is part of the game, fear loses its leverage. Every hand becomes an experiment, not a verdict. You're no longer defending identity, you're exploring possibility. Then there's frustration, the silent collapse of patience that turns reason into noise. You know the feeling. You've been chipped down by small pots, lost a few coin flips, and suddenly the cards feel personal. You start calling too wide, bluffing too fast, reacting instead of responding. This is the emotional equivalent of quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. The only way out is stillness. Pause, breathe, stack your chips neatly, not because it changes anything, but because it reestablishes control over your environment. Physical order precedes mental order. Every player who's learned to rebuild focus after tilt knows this truth. The hand doesn't start when the cards are dealt. It starts when the mind is calm. Ego's more subtle. It hides behind logic, disguising itself as confidence. Ego tells you to outplay your opponent at every opportunity, to force dominance, to win every pot that matters, but the game punishes that mindset brutally. Heads-up poker isn't about domination, it's about rhythm. Some hands aren't yours to win. True confidence is knowing that and folding anyway. Ego wants to prove, awareness wants to observe. When you feel that fire rising, that itch to get it back or teach them a lesson, remember this: you're no longer playing poker. You're playing emotion. And emotion doesn't care about bankrolls. The mental game of heads-up poker is an art of returning, again and again, to neutrality. Neutrality doesn't mean detachment, it means alignment. It's the quiet state between aggression and hesitation where thought and feeling meet. In that space, decisions flow easily because you're no longer split. The cards, the opponent, the rhythm of the hand, everything feels integrated. You're not resisting the outcome, you're participating in it. That's what people mean when they talk about flow. It's not mystical. It's what happens when the ego stops interrupting awareness. Let's explore this through a story. There was a player, quiet, deliberate, who'd made a deep run in an online series. He'd played well all day, patient and balanced. But in the final heads-up match, something shifted. His opponent was hyper-aggressive, relentless. Every time he opened, he was 3-bet. Every check was punished with an overbet. Slowly, frustration turned to anger. He's just pushing me around, the player thought. I'll show him. A few hands later, he found Queen 10 suited. He opened. The opponent 3-bet again. Instead of pausing, he shoved 25 blinds, a reckless overreaction born of emotion, not logic. The opponent called instantly with aces. Game over. Afterward, the player sat staring at the screen. He wasn't angry at the loss, and he was angry at himself, because he knew the truth. The cards weren't what beat him. Emotion did. Weeks later, he reflected on that session. He realized that the mistake hadn't started with the shove. It had started 20 minutes earlier, when he stopped breathing deeply, when he let impatience tighten his chest and dictate his tempo. The real lesson wasn't tactical, it was emotional hygiene. Tilt doesn't explode in one moment. It leaks slowly through every unchecked thought. Emotional control, then, isn't a single act. It's a practice. It's built through habits you carry both at and away from the table. Simple rituals reinforce focus, pausing before decisions, breathing through tension, maintaining posture. Even the way you handle your chips matters. Sloppy movement reflects a scattered mind. Deliberate rhythm reinforces calm. Every external habit feeds the internal one. One powerful tool for emotional reset is narrative reframing. When you lose a big hand, your mind instantly writes a story. I always get unlucky. They don't deserve that win. I blew it. Each of those sentences tightens your focus around frustration. But what if you replace them with curiosity? Interesting spot. What made me choose that line? Or, what did I learn about their range from that hand? This reframing turns loss into data. It transforms pain into fuel. Over time, that mental shift changes everything. You stop spiraling because nothing feels wasted anymore. Another core discipline is awareness of fatigue. Heads-up play, especially deep matches, drains focus faster than any other format. You're involved in every hand, every decision, every moment. It's easy to confuse tiredness with tilt. You start second-guessing simple actions, overthinking patterns that aren't there. The solution is simple, but few players honor it. Step away. Just for a minute. Breathe. Let the body reset. Mental endurance isn't built by resisting breaks. It's built by recognizing when you need them. The strongest players aren't the ones who grind longest. They're the ones who reset fastest. At its core, emotional control means surrendering to process. You can't command outcomes, you can only guide behavior. The cards will humble you, opponents will frustrate you, variants will mock your patience. But none of it defines you unless you let it. You're not the wins, you're not the losses, you're the space between them, the awareness that observes both. That awareness is indestructible. When you play from that space, no bad beat can shake you, and no victory can inflate you. You simply return to center, again and again, hand after hand. Over time, this composure becomes your true edge. Most players are technically competent, but emotionally fragile. They crumble under pressure not because they lack knowledge, but because they've never trained stillness. If you can remain calm when they can't, you gain access to a part of the game they'll never see. You begin reading timing tells not as guesses, but as patterns of energy, the way tension shifts across the table, the rhythm of breath between actions. Awareness sharpens when emotion fades. That's the paradox of poker's mental game. To compete fiercely, you must care deeply, but not personally. Care about process, not pride. Care about precision, not perfection. The moment you make peace with uncertainty, you stop fighting the game and start flowing with it. The opponent across from you becomes a partner in awareness, a mirror reflecting your own composure back at you. Because in the end, every match teaches the same lesson. Emotion is the loudest player at the table. Learn to quiet it and you'll hear everything else more clearly. The texture of the cards, the rhythm of betting, the quiet truth beneath the noise. And that's when you realize that emotional control isn't just a poker skill, it's a way of living. Calm in victory, calm in defeat, and always returning to center. Once you've built structure, emotional control and rhythm, the game begins to shift into subtler dimensions. The hands start to feel familiar, yet each one carries a new layer of depth. This is the stage of mastery where logic and instinct start to overlap, where the mechanical understanding of poker evolves into something closer to art. Here, the true conversation of heads-up play unfolds, not between two players, but between awareness and illusion. At this level, the difference between good and great isn't who knows more, it's who notices more. The cards tell stories, but so do the pauses between them. Timing, bet size, silence, breathing, all of these become forms of language. The experienced player learns to read tone, not just words. A slightly delayed check might mean nothing one day and everything the next. Awareness turns patterns into music. You begin to sense when a hand doesn't fit the story your opponent is trying to tell. They bet too quickly on a scare card, or too confidently on a board they shouldn't love. Those small breaks in rhythm are where intuition awakens, not as a guess but as recognition without analysis. Timing is one of the most profound tools in advanced heads-up play. It's invisible yet decisive. Knowing when to act fast and when to slow down isn't random, it's control of tempo. Some players weaponize speed, forcing you into reactive states where logic lags behind pressure. Others use stillness, freezing the flow until impatience breaks the opponent's discipline. The expert player moves between both like a conductor, guiding the tempo without forcing it. You bet not because you must, but because the rhythm calls for it. The more you align with that rhythm, the more your decisions feel inevitable. Combo logic, the quiet backbone of modern poker, also evolves at this stage. At lower levels, players think in absolutes. I have a straight, I have top pair, I have nothing. But at the advanced level, you think in combinations. You don't see a single hand, you see a web of possible holdings that could reach this point. When you bet, you're not representing one card combination, you're representing a distribution of outcomes that make sense in the story you've told so far. This doesn't just make your line credible, it makes it fluid. Every move supports the narrative's internal logic. The moment you understand that your hand is only a single note in a larger composition, you start to play with harmony instead of conflict. But perhaps the most advanced insight of all is understanding that rigidity kills awareness. Poker theory provides structure, but theory alone can become a cage. Solvers can tell you optimal frequencies and bet sizes, but no algorithm can account for human emotion, the exhaustion in your opponent's posture, the subtle acceleration in their breathing when they're bluffing, the hesitation before a river bet that feels rehearsed instead of natural. These are not deviations from theory, they're opportunities born from human imperfection. To ignore them is to reduce the game to math and miss its poetry. True mastery requires you to hold both, the logic of equilibrium and the intuition of empathy. Consider this scenario. You're deep in a long heads-up match, evenly stacked. The flop comes ace-7-4 rainbow. You've raised preflop with king-7 suited. You bet small, your opponent calls. The turn brings a 9. You check, they bet large. A sizing that doesn't fit the earlier rhythm. Something about the pace of the bet feels forced, like that they've been holding their breath. You call, not out of stubbornness, but because awareness tells you the story is crooked. The river comes a deuce. They fire again, this time smaller, almost uncertain. You pause. The math says fold, your instinct says call. You breathe, replay the hand, and realize their turn bet made no sense for a value range. You call. They show jack-8 suited. Nothing. It's not luck. It's awareness meeting inconsistency. Moments like that define high-level play. They teach you to trust what you feel when what you feel has been earned through thousands of repetitions. Intuition without experience is guessing. Intuition built from observation is data remembered by the body. You stop questioning whether you should trust it. You simply do, because your awareness has matured into quiet certainty. There's also humility in advanced play. The deeper your understanding, the more you realize how fragile it is. You can't predict everything, and you're not supposed to. every hand is still an act of surrender to uncertainty, to variance, to human imperfection. Awareness is not control, it's acceptance. You learn to make peace with mistakes, to view every error as part of your education. The ego fades, replaced by gratitude for the depth of the game itself. The more you see, the less you need to prove. That's why the best players remain calm even after brutal beats. It's not that they don't care, it's that they understand caring differently. They care about execution, not ego. They measure success not by the size of the pot, but by the clarity of the process. The deeper your insight goes, the more you realize that winning and losing are just outcomes. Presence is the real goal. Over time, this awareness transforms how you read others and yourself. You start to notice how your own rhythms change under stress. Maybe your bets grow slightly larger after losing a pot. Maybe your posture shifts when you're strong. The game turns inward. Every session becomes an opportunity to refine self-awareness. You realize that reading opponents is just a practice in reading yourself through another person. The patterns you exploit in them are the same ones you once carried within. This level of reflection is rare, but it's the bridge between good poker and profound poker. The mechanics fade into intuition, the theory dissolves into feel, and the act of playing becomes meditative. You no longer fight variance, you float within it. You understand that control is temporary, but awareness is permanent. Each hand becomes a single moment in an endless pattern, and every decision, whether right or wrong, teaches you how to see more clearly. In the end, deeper insight isn't about perfection, it's about integration, bringing everything you've learned together so that logic, intuition, and emotion exist in harmony. You play from stillness, adapt without fear, and observe without judgment. You're no longer trying to win the session, you're learning to remain awake within it. That's what heads-up mastery truly is, a sustained awareness of self in the presence of chaos. The table becomes your mirror, the silence becomes your teacher, and the game, as it always was, becomes a practice in staying conscious. Here's a short example. It's late. The room is quiet except for the soft clicking of chips and the faint hum of the ceiling fan. You've been playing for hours, trading small pots back and forth, neither side giving much away. Across the table, your opponent sits perfectly still, focused, unreadable. The kind of player who doesn't talk, doesn't rush, doesn't tilt, just watches. You can feel the weight of every decision in the air between you. The deck slides across the felt, smooth and soundless. You look down at your cards, 9-6 of hearts. Nothing special, but in heads up, almost anything can become something. You open with a small raise, the big blind calls. The flop comes 10-7-5, 2 hearts. You've flopped a straight draw and a flush draw, power disguised as potential. Your opponent checks. You bet small, testing the waters. They call. The turn is the queen of clubs. No improvement. The board feels heavier now. They check again, but something about the timing feels rehearsed. A little too quick, a little too measured. You sense calculation, not comfort. You bet again, steady and calm. They pause, then call. The pot grows, tension growing with it. The river comes the 8 of diamonds, the board 10-7-5, queen 8. You've made your straight. A quiet satisfaction rises in your chest, but you keep it buried. Across the table, your opponent reaches for chips, not many, just enough to make the move deliberate. They bet half the pot. You breathe, you study the board, their hands, their rhythm. This is the kind of moment that defines long sessions, not the size of the pot, but the clarity of your response. You replay the story. Check, call, river, lead. It's a story that makes sense for a missed draw turned bluff, not for a hand that improved. They've been careful all night, but something about the bet feels forced, as if they needed to be the one to end it. You don't raise, you don't rush, you just call. They show the king-jack as a missed gut shot that never arrived. You turn over your 9-6 and slide the chips toward your stack. No words, just stillness. Your opponent nods emotionless and prepares for the next hand. But the real victory isn't the pot. It's the quiet that follows, the sense of alignment, that you saw the story clearly, that you didn't overreact, that you didn't need to prove anything. You weren't fighting them, you were simply seeing them. And in doing so, you saw yourself. You remember how months ago, you might have raised that river out of greed or folded out of fear. You might have made it about winning instead of understanding. But tonight, there's no adrenaline, no tension, no need to conquer. Just calm awareness. The same kind you've been practicing hand after hand. You realize the true flow of heads up isn't about momentum. It's about stillness between moments, the ability to be completely absorbed without losing perspective. The dealer shuffles. You watch the cards move in rhythm, feel your breathing slow again. Each motion feels deliberate. Each sound part of a pattern you've learned to trust. The next hand begins, and there's no carryover from the last. No pride, no relief, just presence. The game continues, and so do you. The chips move back and forth, small victories and quiet losses blending into one continuous pulse. You find yourself smiling slightly, not at the result, but at the awareness that you're finally playing without noise, that for the first time you're not trying to force the game into meaning. You're letting it reveal meaning on its own. At some point, your opponent glances up, maybe curious about the ease in your expression. They look puzzled for a second, then return to their stack. They don't realize that you're not playing against them anymore. You're just using them as a mirror, a reflection of every habit, every emotion, every lesson you've learned about patience and presence. The cards come again, the lights stay soft, the fan hums, and you sit there in quiet rhythm, a student of awareness disguised as a player of cards, understanding, perhaps for the first time, that this game was never really about poker. It was always about learning how to stay awake in the silence. Every great player eventually learns that progress doesn't come from theory alone. It comes from experience, slow focused repetition that trains the mind to remain calm under uncertainty. So in this section, imagine sitting at the table again. The air is still. The light feels soft against the felt. You can hear every shuffle, every breath. We'll move through several hands, each one a lesson, each one a mirror, exploring different angles of the heads-up mindset. The goal isn't to memorize these plays, it's to notice what happens inside you as they unfold. Hand 1, the weight of patience. You're dealt King 4 offsuit on the button. You raise. Your opponent defends. The flop falls. Ace 7-3 rainbow. You've missed completely. You continuation bet 1/3 pot, a small balance probe. Your opponent calls. The turn is a blank to 9. They check again. You could fire another barrel here, but your instinct says no. The board doesn't favour your range anymore, and the rhythm of their call felt deliberate, not hesitant. You check back. The river brings another low card, the 2 of spades. They bet half the pot. A younger version of you would have folded quickly, disgusted at missing another flop. But now you take your time. You replay the action. Pre-flop call, flop float, turn check, river bet. That line fits a wide range of weak axe hands or pure floats trying to buy the pot. You count the combinations in your head. There are far more bluffs than value hands that take this route. You breathe out, then you call. They show 10-8 suited, a total miss. You slide the chips toward yourself and feel something subtle shift inside you. Not pride, awareness. You didn't react emotionally to missing the flop. You stayed inside the hand until it told its full story. Patience, you realize, is not waiting. It's listening. Hand 2, the rhythm of control. You're on the big blind with the 8-7 of clubs. The button opens. You call the flop 9-6-5 with 2 clubs. You've flopped a straight and flush draw, the kind of hand that tempts chaos. You check. Your opponent bets small. You check raise instantly, almost reflexively, feeling the rush of having a monster draw. They pause, then call. The turn is a blank. The king of diamonds. You still have massive equity but no made hand. You feel tension in your chest. The urge to fire again burns through you. You want to push, to finish it here, but awareness interrupts. You ask yourself, why am I betting? The truth hits. It's not strategy, it's impatience. You're uncomfortable sitting in uncertainty, so you check. Your opponent bets 2/3 pot. You call. The river brings the 10 of clubs, the perfect card. You've made your flush. Now instead of exploding with relief, you stay quiet. You lead small, using the same sizing you would if you'd missed. They fold quickly. No showdown, no big pot. But the win feels pure, because you didn't let emotion dictate timing. You learned that control isn't about domination, it's about direction. Hand 3, the courage to fold. You hold ace-queen offsuit on the button. You open, your opponent 3 bets from the big blind. You call, the flop comes king 7-2 rainbow. They continuation bet half the pot, you call, and the turn is the jack of hearts, giving you a gut shot. They bet again, larger now. You hesitate. It's a strong line, but something inside you resists folding. You tell yourself, if I hit the 10, I'll stack them. You call. The river is the 5 of clubs. They shove. You sit still. Your heartbeat is loud, but your breathing stays slow. You replay the line, preflop 3-bet, flop bet, turn big bet, river shove. Every action aligns with a polarized range, strong value or nothing, but the sizing, the rhythm, the confidence, it all feels real. You fold. Slowly, calmly. They flip over kings, not to mock you but to show respect. And in that moment, you feel no regret, because you didn't fold out of fear. You folded out of awareness. You trusted the rhythm. Courage isn't always calling. Sometimes it's folding cleanly, knowing that surrender is also a form of strength. Hand 4. Reading stillness. You've been trading pots for an hour. Your opponent has tightened up, playing fewer hands. Then suddenly, they open from the button. Larger than usual. You sense something off. You defend with 10-8 suited. The flop. Queen 8-5. You check. They bet big. You call. The turn 3 of spades. They bet big again. Same motion, same size. Too symmetrical, too perfect. You call again. The river. King of hearts. They shove all in. The pot is massive. You close your eyes for half a second. Rewind everything. Big open. Big flop bet. Big turn bet. No hesitation anywhere. Perfect rhythm, and yet something about that perfection feels unnatural. Humans rarely move in straight lines. You call. They show Jack 10, nothing but air. They exhale hard like they'd been holding their breath the whole hand. You nod slightly, not triumphant, just aware. You weren't reading cards, you were reading silence. You noticed what wasn't there, the organic uncertainty that real strength carries. That's how awareness feels in action. Soft, quiet, intuitive. Hand 5, the mirror of emotion. You're on the big blind with pocket 4s. The button raises, you call. The flop 9-5-4 rainbow. You've hit a set, a beautiful still moment. You check, they bet, you call. The turn is the queen. You check again. They bet large this time. Fast, assertive. You know you're ahead, but a thought flickers. What if they catch up on the river? You can feel the pulse of greed and fear in equal measure. You raise too quickly. They fold. You win. But the moment feels off. You realize you weren't raising for value. You were protecting yourself from anxiety. You didn't trust the flow. That's when it hits you. Awareness doesn't stop at big calls. It also means having the discipline to sit inside comfort without forcing it. You learn to hold still even when you're winning. Hand 6, the reversal. You're down in chips now. The match has stretched late into the night. You can feel fatigue creeping in, not just physical but emotional. You're dealt ace 10 suited, you open, your opponent 3 bets, you call. The flop 10-7-3 with 2 spades. You've hit top pair, good kicker. They continuation bet small, you raise, they call, and the turn brings the queen of spades, the tough card, completing draws, complicating ranges. They check. You check behind, keeping control. At the river comes the 2 of hearts. They lead small, almost dismissively, as if to provoke. You study them. Something about the sizing feels arrogant, a you'll fold anyway kind of bet. You call, they show 8-9, missed draw, the chips slide your way, and you exhale. You realize how awareness reappears even when fatigue sets in. You didn't react to provocation, you responded to rhythm. This was discipline in motion, logic guided by intuition, emotion softened by presence. Hand 7, the lesson beneath it. As the night stretches on, something unexpected happens. You stop thinking of hands as battles, you stop keeping track of wins and losses. Instead, you start noticing. You notice how your breathing changes between pots, how your hands move differently when you're uncertain, how silence feels heavier when you're losing and lighter when you're focused. You begin to understand that poker, at its core, is a laboratory for awareness. Every hand is a new experiment in presence, a chance to observe your reactions, to refine the way you meet pressure. The cards are incidental, they're just a mirror that reveals your habits. The real game is happening in the space between decisions, the moment you hesitate before betting, the flicker of thought before folding. These are where the lessons live. One day, after thousands of these hands, you'll look back and realize that poker taught you how to see yourself clearly. That's what this guided sequence is really about. Not strategy, not dominance, reflection. Because when you strip away the blinds, the stacks, the math, what remains is simple awareness. The table teaches you to listen, to adapt, to stay centered. And when you leave the table, that awareness follows you into life itself, into work, relationships, conflict, patience, and peace. You'll find yourself making decisions more slowly, breathing before acting, observing before speaking. That's the same discipline that once guided your bets, only now it guides your life. As the final hand of this sequence plays out, you look across the table and see not an opponent, but a mirror. The same focus, the same fatigue, the same curiosity reflected back. You realize that every player who sits across from you, every challenger, every rival, is just another version of yourself, playing out their own lessons through the rhythm of the cards. And suddenly the game feels weightless. You stop fighting variance, you stop chasing momentum, you simply play, clear, calm, awake. That's the essence of the heads-up mindset. Stillness inside motion, awareness inside uncertainty, freedom inside structure. The cards shuffle, the light hums, the next hand begins, and once again you return, quietly, fully to the center of the table. There's a moment in every player's evolution where logic and instinct begin to blur, not in conflict, but in conversation. At first, they seem like opposites. Logic is structure, math, analysis. Instinct is feeling, speed, intuition, but the longer you play, the more you realize they're part of the same current. Logic gives your decisions shape, instinct gives them flow. The best players don't choose one over the other. They let both speak, each in its turn, like two sides of the same breath. In the beginning, you cling to logic. It's the compass that keeps you from getting lost in chaos. You study ranges, calculate pot odds, memorize frequencies. You build a scaffolding of knowledge to hold your decisions upright. And it works, to a point. You stop making random mistakes. You feel grounded in numbers, safe in structure. But eventually the structure itself becomes limiting. You start noticing that pure logic can't explain everything. Why did your opponent make that strange call that shouldn't exist? Why did a certain bet size feel wrong even though it was technically correct? The math provides stability, but it can't provide timing. And timing is everything. Instinct enters when the mind grows quiet enough to listen. It's not guesswork. It's pattern recognition beneath consciousness. After thousands of hands, your brain accumulates signals you don't consciously process. Rhythm, timing, posture, tone, reaction. Those fragments of awareness form an invisible database. When instinct speaks, it's not magic. It's your experience surfacing faster than your thoughts can catch up. It's the body remembering what the mind has forgotten. But the challenge is balance. Too much logic and you play mechanically. Too much instinct and you play impulsively. The art lies in knowing when to trust which voice. In a long heads-up matches, that balance becomes survival itself, because fatigue blurs clarity and emotion disguises itself as intuition. You might think you're feeling something when in truth you're reacting to frustration or fear. True instinct is calm. False instinct is urgent. The difference is subtle but everything. Consider a moment deep into a session. You're holding Jack 10 of hearts on the button. You open, your opponent calls. The flop comes King 9-5 with one heart. You have a gut shot and backdoor draw. You continuation bet. They check raise big. Logic says fold. The board hits their range hard. But something about the raise feels hollow. You've played them for hours. You've seen their rhythm. Every time they're truly strong, they act slower, more deliberate. This time they were instant, almost rehearsed. You call, the turn brings the Queen of Hearts. You've made your straight and your flush draw strengthens. They bet again, this time small, a nervous probe. You raise, and they fold immediately. That decision wasn't unlogical, it was informed instinct, logic filtered through awareness. You didn't defy reason, you followed a deeper layer of it. Now imagine the reverse. You're dealt pocket eights in the big blind. The flop comes 10-9-7. Your opponent bets small, you raise. They call. The turn is a jack. You've made a straight, but the board is connected and dangerous. They check. Instinct whispers, they're weak. Push. But logic intervenes. You review the action. Open call, flop raise call, turn check. Against your range, that's a perfect trapline for a higher straight or a set. You check back, keeping the pot manageable. The river is an ace. They shove, you fold, they show queen 8 for the higher straight. This time logic saved you from instinct. The difference wasn't emotion, it was evidence. Awareness is the referee between the two. It tells you which voice is genuine and which is noise. Many players treat logic and instinct as a war, a struggle between calculation and feeling. But in truth, they are partners. Logic builds the framework of your play. Instinct gives it life. When both are aligned, decisions feel effortless. You don't think, you know, you're not frozen by fear or forced by ego. You simply move, and the movement feels right. One of the clearest signs of mastery is non-conflict. When you're new to the game, every choice feels heavy. You analyze, debate, doubt. The mind fractures between math and emotion, but as you grow, that internal noise fades. You learn to trust that both systems can coexist, that intuition can confirm math, and math can test intuition. That's where flow lives. Flow isn't about constant winning, it's about constant clarity, the state where every move, whether bet, fold, or call, feels integrated with the rhythm of the hand. Still, you must learn to guard instinct from emotion. The two often disguise themselves as each other. Frustration can feel like intuition. Excitement can sound like confidence. Before acting on a feeling, pause. Ask yourself, does this come from stillness or from noise? If it feels calm and grounded, it's instinct. If it feels urgent or anxious, it's ego. The body knows the difference long before the brain admits it. In practical terms, logic and instinct also alternate through stages of a match. Early on, logic dominates. You're building profiles, identifying frequencies, establishing baselines. Later, once the data is collected, instinct takes the lead. You start feeling flow, reading the human patterns rather than the numbers. When you merge the two, something remarkable happens. You stop playing against the opponent and start playing with them. The game becomes a dialogue, your logic speaking to their instinct, your awareness reflecting their emotion. Each action informs the other until the game becomes symphonic. This is why the best players talk about trust. Not trust in luck, but trust in self-awareness. Trust that you've studied enough to recognize truth when you feel it. Trust that your intuition is built on repetition, not impulse. Trust that even if you're wrong, your process is right. That trust is freedom. Without it, you hesitate. With it, you flow. The deeper truth is that logic and instinct mirror life itself. Logic is planning. Instinct is presence. Logic builds the schedule. Instinct decides when to deviate. You need both to live with clarity. The same patience that keeps you from over-betting a river is the same awareness that keeps you from overreacting in a conversation. Poker becomes training for existence. It teaches you that control and surrender are not opposites. They're rhythms. So when you sit down at the table, let both voices speak. Let logic draw the boundaries. Let instinct paint within them. Let awareness decide which one to follow in each moment. That's how mastery sounds. Not loud, but balanced. A quiet cooperation between mind and intuition. Built on thousands of hands. Refined through stillness. Because in the end, awareness doesn't choose sides. It simply listens and moves when the time feels right. The deeper you travel into this game, the more you realize that true strength isn't found in brilliance. It's found in consistency. Anyone can play well for a session. Few can play well for a year. The difference is discipline, not the rigid kind built on willpower, but the quiet kind built on awareness. Long-term discipline isn't about forcing yourself to perform. It's about maintaining alignment between who you are and how you play, hand after hand, day after day. In heads-up poker, every leak, every habit, every emotional crack is exposed. There's no table to hide behind, no easy seat to wait for. Over time, the game becomes a mirror that never stops reflecting you. If your ego's loud, it shows. If your focus wavers, it punishes you. If your patience slips, it drains you. That's why the players who last are not the most aggressive or the most gifted. They're the most balanced. They know how to reset, how to let go, how to return to stillness after every swing. Discipline begins with routine, not superstition or ritual, but rhythm. You learn when you play best, what time of day, what emotional state, what environment allows clarity. You learn to protect that rhythm like a craftsman protects his tools. You rest before you play, you eat with awareness, You prepare your space so that when the cards arrive, there's nothing pulling at your mind. The disciplined player doesn't rely on motivation. Motivation fades. Rhythm endures. Bankroll management is discipline in physical form, a reflection of your relationship with emotion. The reckless player sees money as ammunition. The disciplined player sees it as oxygen. They understand that oxygen must be conserved, respected, and replenished. Every buy-in is a breath. Every session's a controlled exhale. You don't chase losses because you've accepted that variance isn't an enemy, it's gravity. You can't fight it, only work within it. That's what long-term awareness looks like, trusting the law of averages without needing to control the outcome of each moment. Study is another pillar. But discipline here doesn't mean endless hours of analysis. It means deliberate refinement. You review not to obsess, but to clarify. You notice the patterns in your mistakes, the situations where impatience creeps in, the lines you overplay, the moments you ignore instinct. Each review session becomes meditation, a mirror session with yourself. The more you study this way, the less your mistakes define you. They simply inform you. Discipline also means knowing when not to play. There will be days when your focus isn't sharp, when frustration lingers before you've even sat down. The disciplined player recognizes this early. They step away, not in defeat, but in respect for the game. In doing so, they protect their mindset, their bankroll, and their long-term growth. Most players think the edge comes from playing more. In truth, it comes from playing well. The ability to wait, that's discipline disguised as patience. Over the years, discipline becomes character. You start to notice that the same calm that guides your folds at the table guides your reactions in life. You pause more before speaking. You make decisions from stillness rather than noise. The habits built through poker, observation, restraint, patience, acceptance, begin to echo in everything else. Poker, you realize, isn't just a test of skill. It's training for living with awareness in an unpredictable world. The great players all share one quiet habit. They reflect, not just on hands, but on themselves. After every session they ask, did I play with clarity? Did I chase? Did I listen? The results matter, but not as much as the process, because results are waves. Discipline is the ocean. You don't control the tides, you learn to float within them. In the long run, discipline becomes freedom. You no longer fight emotion because you expect it. You no longer chase results because you trust your rhythm. You stop proving yourself and start expressing yourself. And paradoxically, that's when your best poker emerges. Not from effort, but from ease. Because mastery doesn't arrive with a trophy or a win graph. It arrives quietly in the moments when you fold the second best hand without resentment, when you study a mistake without judgment, when you lose a session and still sleep peacefully. That's when you know discipline has become part of you. And at that point, poker stops being something you do. It becomes something you are. The cards are still, the chips are quiet now, the night has thinned into silence, and the air feels different, lighter somehow. You've played for hours, maybe days. The hands blur together, the wins and losses dissolve into a single steady rhythm. You can't even remember the moment the game stopped being about poker and became something else entirely. But that's how mastery always arrives, quietly, without an announcement. You sit there for a while after the final hand, not touching the chips, not counting the profit, just breathing. The table feels less like an arena now, and more like a mirror, one that's been reflecting you back at yourself this whole time. Every emotion, every mistake, every flicker of ego has been staring at you through the cards. You used to think this was a game of skill and deception. Now you see it's a game of awareness. All along, you weren't learning how to play cards. You were learning how to see yourself clearly. Every hand was just another version of the same question. Can you stay calm when it matters most? Can you trust your logic when doubt whispers? Can you trust your intuition when logic fails? Can you make peace with uncertainty? Not as a concept, but as a companion? Poker teaches that. It doesn't reward perfection, it rewards presence. You've seen it in the way a single mistake made in frustration unravels an entire session. And you've seen the opposite, how a small, steady act of patience restores balance. The game is a conversation between control and surrender, between force and flow, between wanting to know and accepting that you never really will. Heads-up poker just removes all distractions until those lessons are naked in front of you. When you started this journey, you probably wanted to win, to beat the opponent, to prove something. Everyone does. But the longer you stayed at the table, the more you realize there's nothing to prove. You're not fighting the other player. You're not even fighting the cards. You're learning to quiet the voice that needs to win, so the one that knows how to play can finally breathe. The deeper truth is this. Poker doesn't create emotion. It exposes it. The game doesn't make you angry or scared or proud. It simply shows you the anger, fear, and pride. Pride that were already there. That's why so few players truly master it. It's not the math that breaks them. It's the mirror. They come to the table to dominate, not to understand. And when the mirror shows them something uncomfortable, they look away. But if you stay, if you keep playing, keep observing, keep letting the mirror do its work, something remarkable happens. The ego dissolves. You stop needing to win every hand because you start winning something else, awareness itself. You begin to see patterns not only in others, but in yourself. The subtle tightening of your shoulders after a loss. The slight overconfidence that creeps in after a big bluff works. You start noticing the difference between clarity and emotion, between decisions made from calmness and decisions made from noise. That awareness changes everything. The game slows down, the noise fades. What used to feel like chaos now feels like choreography. Eventually you realize that the most powerful player at the table is the one who doesn't need anything from it. Not validation, not excitement, not redemption, just experience. That's when the game becomes peaceful again, not boring, not detached, but deeply alive. You stop trying to extract meaning from every pot and start seeing meaning in every moment. Win or lose, it all belongs. Every hand teaches if you're quiet enough to hear it. That's what focus and flow really mean. Not tunnel vision, but total presence. You're not straining to think, you're not forcing results, you're simply here. One decision, one breath, one hand at a time. Flow isn't intensity. It's surrender to rhythm. Focus isn't tension, it's ease. The more you let go, the clearer everything becomes. And from that clarity, good decisions arise naturally, like ripples on still water. Heads-up poker, more than any other format, teaches that presence because it strips away everything that hides distraction. There's no waiting for cards, no leaning on others, no autopilot. Every decision is yours alone. You're constantly exposed to variance, to pressure, to the reflection of your own tendencies, and that's what makes it beautiful. It forces you to evolve, not through knowledge, but through awareness. At some point you begin to realize that every opponent is just a different version of the same test. Some will challenge your patience, others will challenge your confidence. Some will frustrate you into aggression, others will lull you into complacency. But each one serves the same purpose, to show you where you still react, where you still tighten, where you still lose presence. Once you recognize that, no opponent ever feels like an enemy again. They're simply the teacher you needed that night. And after enough of these lessons, something inside you changes. You stop measuring success by graphs or sessions or titles. You start measuring it by the quiet moments, when you lose a big pot and stay calm, when you fold a hand you wanted to play and feel no regret, when you sense emotion rising and let it pass without needing to act on it. Those moments are invisible to everyone else, but they're everything. That's where mastery hides, in the decisions no one sees, in the patience no one praises. In time, you come to understand that poker and life are the same classroom. The situations differ. Money, love, ambition, failure. But the lesson never changes. Can you stay aware when pressure builds? Can you make space between reaction and response? Can you trust your rhythm when nothing goes your way? That's why the table becomes a sacred place for those who truly love it. Not because it's glamorous or profitable, but because it's honest. The table doesn't lie. It reflects you exactly as you are, moment by moment. And in that reflection you grow, quietly, gradually, permanently. So when the session finally ends and the last chip stops spinning, you don't walk away feeling victorious or defeated. You walk away clear. The clarity doesn't come from winning, it comes from awareness. You've learned that everything in the game, the cards, the variants, the bluffs, the fear, all of it was working for you, not against you. Each one was a doorway into a deeper kind of stillness. That's the lesson beneath it all. Poker is not about mastering cards, it's about mastering yourself. The chips are just instruments. The table is just the mirror. The real game is within, and if you can stay calm in that space, if you can make one good decision at a time with full awareness through noise, fatigue, and emotion, then you've already won, regardless of what the river shows, because one day, long after the last session fades, you'll realize that the quiet lessons of heads-up play were never about poker at all. They were about how to live, balanced, awake, and free from the need to control anything. And that's when the game finally teaches you its deepest secret, that every decision, every hand, every breath has always been leading you back to the same place, the present moment.